Hello class, welcome back to the week 11 material, and in this third segment we're going to talk about how to create directories, what exactly directories are, how to navigate between them, and how to actually work with them on the remote server. So first of all, first order of business, we'll go ahead and get back onto the remote server, and again, we don't have to type out that same SSH command over and over again. We could just simply hit the up arrow key to recall that command. Just simply hit enter to run it again. Then everything after that hopefully is becoming a little bit more familiar. And now that we're on the server, we'll go ahead and introduce the concept of a directory. Now, for our intents and purposes, there is a little difference between a directory and a folder. You can sort of think of a folder as something that contains its own collection of files, and a directory is very much the same thing. There's really no difference between the two. I'm sure there's a technical difference. One's accessed by command line interfacing, the other is graphical user interface, but for all intents and purposes, they are essentially the same thing. So we're not really going to worry about the difference between those two terms, but sometimes I'll refer to them interchangeably as directory and folder, but for our intents and purposes, there really is no difference. So one of the nice things about directories is they allow us to sort our file systems a lot more efficiently. If you've ever seen the desktop of someone who does not know how to create a folder, you can imagine the chaos that might be present there, or if the chaos that maybe you have seen firsthand. If you've seen someone's desktop and they don't have any folders or anything there, everything is just all on the desktop. It's usually a good idea to avoid that level of disorganization on the server as well, but working with directories can get a little bit tricky, and we'll go ahead and explore that and sort of hopefully walk you through how exactly to go about doing that. But first, let's go ahead and think about how we're actually going to create a directory. So in the graphical user interface, you have either a command Shift-N to create a new folder, or right-click, create new folder. And here in the command line interface, the command to accomplish that is mkdir, which is an abbreviation for the term make directory. And then I'll go ahead and just call this directory, I call that sample1. And then whatever you call the directory, that's just what you put after a space here between mkdir space and then whatever the directory is you want to make. And then if you hit enter, that will in fact create the directory, but you don't see any sort of on-screen acknowledgement that it actually created the directory. So we can use the ls command to list everything out. And if we go in here, we can in fact see there's a directory that we created. This isn't going to be the case for all remote servers, but one of the nice things about our class server is everything is nice and color-coded. So text files are colored black, executable files are colored green, directories are colored blue, and as we'll see later on, image files are colored in a pink or magenta color. So everything that's colored blue here is in fact a directory that we can put files into, or even go into. So one thing that you'll see on the screen right away is, hopefully you see the files that we worked with earlier, example.py, another example.py. So let me go ahead and demonstrate something before we get too heavily involved here. So I'll gny the example.py file just to show you that command still works. There's the file that we had earlier. Now, let's say I want to go inside of the directory that we just created, which is sample1 up here. The way that you navigate from one directory to the next, or one folder to the next, is the cd command, which is short for change directory, which is nice because typing the words change in directory out over and over again would be really tedious. So nice abbreviated command here, cd, and then the name of the directory that I want to go into. So here I'm just simply going into the directory that I created up above, cd sample1, and I want you to watch what happens in the bottom left-hand corner of this terminal window when I actually do that. You'll notice that this looks a little bit different now. This bit on the left, on the bottom left here, or on the left-hand side of the screen here, this tells you which directory you're actually located in on the server. So earlier, we just had the tilde. The tilde is a symbol that basically tells you you're in your home directory. So you can sort of think of this as the home folder on your computer, where that's basically where everything in your account on the computer sort of branches out from. So the tilde here represents your quote-unquote home directory, or your home folder. And then this / here basically tells me that I'm within a directory called sample1, and that directory is located within my home directory or my home folder. This is what's referred to as a file path. We'll talk about that in much greater depth in a later segment, but right now the main takeaway message for what's right here is this is telling me I'm not in my home directory anymore. I'm in a different folder or a different directory, so things are going to look a little bit different. In fact, if I go to type the ls command now, you'll see nothing shows up because we're in a directory called sample1 now, which is a file, or excuse me, a folder or directory that we created just now, and because we just created it, it has nothing in there. But let's go ahead and put something in there. So let's say I go ahead and type gne example.py again with the ampersand. Now I want you to actually go ahead and pause the video and tell me what you expect to happen if I were to run this command at this specific point in time. All right, so hopefully the answer that you gave looks something like what's about to happen right now when I go to hit the enter key. So I go hit the enter key. Notice it opened a blank document. And the reason why is because when we ran the gne command before, we were in our home directory. We were not in this directory called sample1. So when we ran this command called gne example.py, what we're telling gne to do is to look for a file called example.py in the directory we're currently in, which is our home directory or our home folder, and open that. Now we're no longer in our home directory. We're in a directory called sample1. So when we run the same command, now we're telling gne to look for a file called example.py inside the sample1 directory. Since that file does not exist, it will create that file for us. It will create a new file for us, and then it will put that inside the sample1 directory, which is where we're currently located on the server. So just to prove that there is a difference between the two, so here on the previous example, we left off by saying hello class. So here I'll type hello world, just to prove that these two files, even though they have the same name, they are in fact two different files. And I'll go back to the command line and then Python this file. You can see I have hello world because I told it to run this file right here, which is inside a directory called sample1 as denoted by this bit on the left-hand side of the terminal window. All right, so now you might be wondering, how do I get out of this directory now that I'm in it? So there's a couple ways that you can accomplish that. There's a couple commands that you can do that. One is cd space ... Make sure there's a space here, otherwise this command's not going to work. Basically what cd space ... does means take me back one directory. So if I go forward one directory into sample1, cd ... will take me back one directory, and you can run this command as many times as you want, but at some point you'll get to the highest directory, which is referred to as the root directory, and at that point it can't go any higher up. You're basically at the top of a tree of files, and we'll talk more about the concept of a file path and this tree idea in a later segment. But that's one option that you can employ, cd ... If you want to go straight to your home directory, there's two different commands you can run to do that. And just to prove that command actually works, let me go back into sample1. And then cd, without anything after that, just cd by itself will take you back to your home directory as denoted by the lone tilde here. There's nothing after the tilde, there's nothing after this squiggly line, so that tells us we are in fact in our home directory again. And then again, I'll go back into sample1. And then another way to get back into your home directory, which is a little bit more direct, cd space tilde, that little squiggle, and that will also take you back to your home directory. And then if you want to get into the root directory, which you can think of as the server's home directory, that command is pretty similar to the one we just typed, but instead of the tilde here, we'll put a /. So cd space / will take us to the root directory or the server's home directory. By server's home directory, I want to draw a distinction between server's home directory and your home directory. Your home directory is this tilde, this squiggle, and the server's home directory is just this /, which is you can't go any higher than this. Once you get to the server's home directory, the root directory, you can't go back. For instance, if I attempt this, I don't go act1. there's nothing for me to go back one. It'll just simply take me back to where I am. And the way you can tell where exactly you are is over on the left-hand side. If you see the tilde here, that means you're in your home directory. If you see just the / here, it means you're in the root directory or the server's home directory. If you type the ls command here, you'll see things look a lot different in the server's home directory than they did in your home directory when we typed the ls command with the tilde on the left-hand side here. And then if we want to go straight back into our home directory, again, 2 different commands we can employ to use that. I'll just use the simplest command, which is just a lone cd. And then that takes me back into my home directory. Another thing that's really useful that we might go ahead and point out right now is, as you can see in this list of files, some of the file names are pretty long, and we probably don't want to type those out over and over again. One of the really nice things about the command line interface is you can use the tab key to fill in parts of the file that are partially complete. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that with a sample 1 directory. So I'll go ahead and type the letter S, and then if I hit the tab key, I'll type it SA, sorry about that, and then I'll hit the tab key. You can see it will look for a directory that begins with SA and then fill in the name here. So it saves me from having to type out the entire name of the directory by hand. If I just type out a distinguishing character sequence, that is a character sequence that's unique to what I'm looking for, if I start typing it out and then hit the tab key, the computer will actually fill in the rest for me, so it saves me from having to manually type out the entire directory name. And then everything after that is pretty standard. And then I'll go ahead and go back to the home directory. And one last thing I want to demonstrate has to do with the ls command. So if I type ls without anything after that, that just lists out everything in the current directory. If you want to know what's in a specific directory without actually going into it first, then you can type ls and the name of the directory that you're interested in. And if you run that command, it'll show you all the files that are contained within the directory that you give right here after the ls command. And that's the only file that we put in the sample1 directory, just example1.py. And if we want to take that a step further, we could do something like this to get a little bit more specificity or to narrow things down a little bit. So the way the computer is going to read this off is it says look for a directory called this, list everything out inside that directory that ends in .py. Remember, anything can take the place of this asterisk here, so that means the file can begin with anything, but it's got to end in .py. So that's how the computer is going to read this off. Just sort of reiterate that again. ls, look for a directory called this, and then give me anything that ends in .py. The beginning of the file can be anything. And what that will do is that will allow me to pick out specific files within this directory without having to do cd, ls in 2 steps. I can sort of abbreviate this process all in one. And this is really nice if you're looking for something specific, like you're looking for all the Python files in the directory, you're looking for all the image files in a directory or something to that effect. This will help narrow down your search. Versus if you type ls on a directory that has, say, 100 or 1,000 files in it, then your screen is going to be filled with a lot of information. It may not be very easy to process. But I think that's going to do it. One thing I do want to go ahead and address, this is not really new material, but this is a very, very common mistake that I see all the time. And I just want to nip this in the bud so that hopefully it doesn't become as much of an issue. Do not do this. This is not how you create files. Remember, mkdir, you can only use this on directories. You can only use this to create new directories. I want to make sure I draw a very clear distinction between folders and files. Those are 2 very separate things. Folders hold onto files. Files hold onto text or some sort of contents. They're not the same. You cannot use mkdir example.py to create a new file. This is not going to work the way that you want it to. To create a new file, you use the gany command, and you create a file just like you would edit a file. So if you want to create a new file called example.py, you would type out this command. If you want to edit a file called example.py, it's the exact same command. Word for word, character for character, it's the exact same command. mkdir is only to create directories. If you try to gny a directory, it's not going to work for you. So mkdir only for directories. Once again, please do not do this. Instead, if you want to create a new file, this is what you do, gne example.py. All right, I think that's going to do it for directories. In the next segment, we'll talk more about file paths and how to read them, and hopefully give you guys a better idea of how exactly file paths work. So with that, I will see you in the next segment.